My name is Amina, and if you're watching Afrilogy, you know life doesn't hand out second chances easily, especially not to 17-year-old orphans living in the packed slums of Mushin, Lagos. I was stirring Gary in our cramped room when Aunt Fatima burst through the door, her wrapper drenched in sweat from the afternoon heat. The smell of burning charcoal and sewage from the gutter outside mixed with her cheap perfume as she slammed a crumpled paper on our rickety table. "Tomorrow you marry Kadir," she announced, not even looking at me. "The mechanic from Alaba Market." The plastic spoon slipped from my fingers. "What?" "You heard me." Her voice was flat, businesslike, the same tone she used when selling second-hand clothes at the market. "Wedding is at Surulere Central Mosque. Imam Yusuf already agreed." I stared at her weathered face, searching for any hint of a joke. There was none. Just the tired lines around her eyes and that stubborn set to her jaw I knew too well. "But Auntie, I just got accepted to Lagos State University. My scholarship." "Scholarship?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Who will pay for your food, your books, your transport? You think scholarship covers everything?" The room felt smaller suddenly. Our neighbor's television blared a Nollywood movie through the thin walls, and somewhere a baby was crying. Normal sounds that now seemed distant and unreal. "I don't even know this Kadir," I whispered. "You'll know him soon enough." Aunt Fatima pulled out her old Nokia phone and dialed a number. "Oga Kadir?" "Yes," she agreed. "Tomorrow at 2 o'clock." I wanted to scream, to run, to do something. But where would I go? The streets of Lagos swallow girls like me whole. At least I knew that much. "Why?" The word came out broken. For the first time, Aunt Fatima's mask slipped. I saw something in her eyes. Fear, maybe desperation. But it disappeared quickly. "Because I owe money, a lot of money. And this Kadir, he paid it all." The truth hit me like a Danfo bus. I wasn't getting married. I was being sold. "How much?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. 200,000 naira. My legs went weak. That was more money than I'd seen in my entire life. More than most families in our area made in 2 years. "To who?" "Oga Olumide, the moneylender." Her voice was barely above a whisper now. "He said if I don't pay by tomorrow, he'll take the room. Then what? We sleep on the street?" I thought about Oga Olumide, a fat man with gold teeth who drove a black Jeep through our neighborhood, collecting debts. Everyone feared him. Stories circulated about what happened to people who couldn't pay. That night, I lay on our shared mattress listening to Aunt Fatima's uneven breathing. She was pretending to sleep, just like I was. Outside, Lagos never truly slept. Generators hummed, night buses honked, and somewhere in the distance, a street preacher's voice echoed through a megaphone. My friend Chinello had warned me about men like Oga Olumide. "They don't just take your money," she'd said. "They take everything." I touched the small scar on my wrist, a reminder of the day my parents died in that bus accident 3 years ago. Aunt Fatima had taken me in when no one else would, fed me, clothed me, even helped me finish secondary school. Now I was her way out. The next morning came too fast. I put on the only decent dress I owned, a blue Ankara my mother had sewn for me before she died. It felt like wearing a shroud. At the mosque, I met Kadir for the first time. He was tall, maybe 25, with kind eyes and calloused hands that spoke of honest work. When he smiled at me, I saw genuine warmth there, not the predatory look I'd expected. "Assalamu alaikum, Amina," he said softly. "I know this isn't how you wanted things to happen." Something in his voice made me look up, really look at him. He seemed as uncomfortable as I was. The ceremony was brief. Imam Yusuf read the vows in Arabic, while about 15 people watched. Mostly Aunt Fatima's neighbors who'd come for the free rice and chicken. No celebration, no joy. Just business being concluded. As we signed the papers, I caught Kadir watching me with an expression I couldn't read. Concern, guilt. When Oga Olumide appeared at the back of the mosque, counting a thick stack of naira notes, everything became clear. The money was real. The debt was real. And now I belonged to a man I didn't know. But as Kadir helped me gather my few belongings, 2 dresses, some school books, and my mother's old headscarf, he surprised me. "Your education doesn't have to end," he said quietly so Aunt Fatima couldn't hear. "We'll find a way." I wanted to believe him, but as we walked away from the only home I'd known for 3 years, I couldn't shake the feeling that my real life was just beginning. And it would be nothing like I'd imagined. Kadir's motorcycle coughed black smoke as we weaved through Lagos traffic toward his home in Agege. I gripped his shirt, trying not to think about how my entire life fit in the small bag pressed between us. His room was smaller than Aunt Fatima's. One mattress on the floor, a wooden box for clothes, and a tiny kerosene stove in the corner. The walls were bare cement, and I could hear his neighbors arguing through the thin partition. "It's not much," he said, setting down my bag, "but it's clean." I nodded, not trusting my voice. Through the single window, I could see clothes hanging on lines and children playing football in the narrow alley below. "I work at Bode's garage," Kadir continued, filling the silence. 6 days a week, Sundays we rest." "What about me?" I asked. "What do you mean? What am I supposed to do, sit here all day?" He looked genuinely surprised by the question. "You're my wife now. You do whatever you want." That evening, while Kadir was at evening prayers, I explored the neighborhood. Women sold vegetables by candlelight, and the air smelled of frying plantain and exhaust fumes. It wasn't so different from Mushin, really. Same poverty, different streets. I found work the next day at the motor park, selling pure water to passengers. 20 naira profit for every bag of 20 sachets. It was hard work under the hot sun, but it was mine. "You don't have to do this," Kadir said when I came home with my first day's earnings, 200 naira. "Yes, I do." I placed the crumpled notes on our shared table. "We both need to eat." Something shifted in his expression then. Respect, maybe? The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm. Kadir left for the garage before dawn. I hawked water until evening. We ate dinner together, usually rice and stew, and talked about small things. The weather, his difficult boss, Oga Bode, my rude customers. He was gentler than I'd expected, patient. He never raised his voice, never demanded anything from me. At night, he slept on a mat on the floor while I took the mattress. "We're married," I told him one evening. "You don't have to sleep on the floor." "When you're ready," he said simply. "Not before." But there were things about Kadir that didn't add up. Like the way he spoke sometimes, his English was too perfect, too educated for a mechanic who'd grown up in Agege. Or how he knew French phrases. I caught him once talking to a customer at the garage, switching languages like he'd been doing it his whole life. "Where did you learn French?" I asked him that night. He paused, spoon halfway to his mouth. "School. We had a teacher from Benin Republic." But his answer came too quickly, too practiced. Then there was the phone call. I was coming back from the market when I heard him talking outside our building. His voice was different, refined, authoritative. "The quarterly reports show a 15% increase in the Lagos-Abuja route," he was saying. "But we need to diversify into the eastern corridor before rainy season affects the roads." I pressed myself against the wall, heart pounding. What mechanic talked about quarterly reports? When he saw me, he quickly ended the call. "Wrong number," he said, shoving the phone into his pocket. But I'd seen the phone. It wasn't the cheap Nokia he usually carried. This one was sleek, expensive looking. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Who was my husband, really? The answer started coming the next week when my friend Chinello visited. She worked as a cleaner at a private hospital in Victoria Island, the kind where rich people went when they were sick. "I saw someone who looked like your husband," she said, braiding my hair in our tiny room. "At Lagoon Hospital. He was in the VIP section." My hand stilled on the comb I was holding. "You sure it was him?" Tall, dark, those same kind eyes. But Amina, she lowered her voice. "He was dressed different. Expensive shirt, nice watch. And the nurses were calling him Sir, like he was somebody important." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Maybe he was visiting someone. Maybe, but Chinello's expression said she didn't believe it either. That evening, I watched Kadir more carefully. Really looked at him for the first time in weeks. His hands were calloused, yes, but his fingernails were too clean for someone who worked with engine oil all day. His posture was too straight, too confident. And when he thought I wasn't looking, he carried himself differently, like someone used to being obeyed. "Kadir," I said as we shared our evening meal, "tell me about your family." He froze, a piece of yam halfway to his mouth. "What about them? Where are they? Do they know about me?" "They're dead." The words came out flat final. Car accident when I was young. But his eyes wouldn't meet mine. I was starting to understand that my husband was a man of many lies, small ones, maybe harmless ones, but lies all the same. The question was, what was he hiding? And more importantly, did I really want to know? 3 months into our marriage, I thought I was beginning to understand Kadir. He was quiet but kind, hard-working but secretive, a man carrying invisible burdens he wouldn't share. Then everything I thought I knew crumbled in a single afternoon. It started with the watch. I was washing our clothes in the shared bathroom when something metallic clattered to the concrete floor. Kadir's work shirt had been hiding a watch, not the cheap digital one he usually wore, but something heavy and gold that caught the fluorescent light like a trap. I picked it up, turning it over in my wet hands. The back was engraved, Rolex Submariner. Even I knew that name meant serious money. When Kadir came home that evening, I was waiting. "Nice watch," I said, holding it up. The color drained from his face. For a moment, he looked like a child caught stealing. "It's fake," he said quickly. "Bought it from a street vendor in Computer Village." "Really?" I examined it closer. "Because it feels pretty real to me." He snatched it from my hands, his gentleness replaced by something harder. "Some things fell from heaven, Amina. Don't ask where they came from." That night, he slept at the garage, the first time he'd ever left me alone in our room. I couldn't sleep. The questions churned in my mind like clothes in a washing machine. Who was this man I'd married? And why was he working as a mechanic if he could afford a watch worth more than most people made in 5 years? The next morning brought answers I wasn't ready for. Aduni arrived early, before the sun had properly risen. My former classmate from secondary school now worked as a nurse at Lagos University Teaching Hospital, and she had news that would change everything. "Amina, we need to talk," she said, her voice tight with urgency. I made us tea with the last of my sugar, sensing this wasn't a social visit. "You remember when I told you about seeing someone who looked like Kadir at that private hospital?" she began. "Yes." "Well, I asked around, quietly." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Amina, your husband isn't just anybody. He's Kadir Adebayo." The name meant nothing to me, and my confusion must have shown on my face. "The Adebayo family," she continued. "They own half of Victoria Island, hotels, shopping malls, oil investments. They're one of the richest families in Nigeria." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "Aduni, you've been working too many night shifts. Kadir is a mechanic. He lives in one room in a gege." I thought so too, until I saw the newspaper clipping. She pulled out a folded piece of paper from her purse. It was from This Day newspaper, dated 2 years ago. The headline read, "Adebayo heir disappears after family dispute." The photograph made my blood freeze. It was Kadir, younger, cleaner, wearing an expensive suit and standing next to a woman in traditional attire. The caption read, "Kadir Adebayo, 25, pictured with his mother, Chief Mrs. Aduni Adebayo, at the Lagos Chamber of Commerce annual gala." "This can't be real," I whispered. "There's more." Aduni's voice was gentle now, seeing my shock. According to the article, he ran away from home rather than marry the daughter of his father's business partner. The family disowned him publicly. I stared at the photograph, my hands shaking. The man in the expensive suit had the same kind eyes as my husband, the same strong jawline, but everything else, the confidence, the wealth, the power, felt like looking at a stranger. But why would he? I couldn't finish the sentence. Maybe he wanted a simple life. Maybe he was tired of all that pressure. Aduni touched my hand. Or maybe he was hiding from something. After she left, I sat alone in our tiny room, staring at the newspaper clipping. Outside, Lagos carried on its chaotic dance, buses honking, children shouting, vendors calling out their wares. But inside our 4 walls, everything had changed. My husband was a millionaire, possibly a billionaire, and he was letting me sell water in the sun for 20 naira profit while he pretended to be a poor mechanic. But why? The anger came first, hot and sudden. Had he been laughing at me this whole time, watching me count our meager earnings while he could buy the entire motor park with pocket change? Then came the hurt, deeper and more painful than the anger. He had lied to me about everything, his family, his background, his entire life. But underneath both emotions was something else, fear. If Kadir was really an Adebayo, then what did that make me? A poor girl from Mushin who'd married into one of Nigeria's most powerful families without even knowing it. When he came home that evening, I was ready for him. "We need to talk," I said, holding up the newspaper clipping. He stopped in the doorway, his face going through a series of expressions: surprise, recognition, and finally, resignation. "Where did you get that?" "Does it matter?" He closed the door behind him and sat on the floor across from me. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked tired, really tired. "What do you want to know?" he asked quietly. "Everything, starting with who you really are." He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. "My name is Kadir Adebayo," he said finally. "My father owns Adebayo Industries. My mother sits on the board of 3 banks. We have houses in Ikoyi, Abuja, London, and Dubai." The words hit me like physical blows. "And you've been living here, like this, with me?" "Yes." "Why?" He looked up then, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Pain, deep and old. "Because I was tired of being a commodity, of having my life planned out by committees and board meetings, of being told who to marry, where to live, what to think." "So you ran away?" "I escaped." The distinction felt important somehow. "But why marry me? Why not just disappear completely?" His answer came so quietly I almost missed it. "Because when I saw you at that mosque, looking scared and alone, you reminded me of myself." Something cracked open in my chest, not quite forgiveness, but understanding. "The money," I said. "The 200,000 naira for Aunt Fatima's debt. That was nothing to you." "Less than nothing." And suddenly I was crying, not from sadness, but from a rage so pure it burned. "Do you have any idea what that money meant to me, to her? We were going to lose everything, and you paid it like it was taxi fare." "I know." "No, you don't know." I stood up, pacing the small space. "You have no idea what it's like to be truly desperate, to count every naira, to go to bed hungry, to watch someone you love get sick because you can't afford a doctor." "You're right," he said simply. "I don't." His honesty deflated my anger like a punctured balloon. "What else?" I asked, sinking back down. "What other lies?" "No more lies," he said. "I promise." But even as he said it, I wondered if I could ever believe him again. Outside, a generator sputtered to life, filling the silence between us with its steady hum. In the distance, a muezzin's call echoed across the neighborhood, calling the faithful to evening prayer. I looked at this man I'd married, this stranger I'd shared a bed and meals and quiet conversations with for 3 months, and realized I knew nothing about him at all. "What happens now?" I asked. "That depends on you." "On me?" "Whether you can forgive me, whether you want to stay married to someone who's been lying to you since the day we met." I thought about it, really thought about it. "I need time," I said finally. "How much time?" "I don't know." He nodded and started gathering his few belongings. "Where are you going?" "To give you space to think." As he reached the door, I called out to him. "Kadir." "Yes?" "Is this real? This room, this life, the way you've been living, is any of it real?" He turned back to me, and for a moment, I saw the man I'd been falling in love with. Not the rich heir or the fake mechanic, but something in between. "The way I feel about you," he said quietly. "That's the most real thing in my life." Then he was gone, leaving me alone with the truth. My husband was a millionaire who'd been playing at poverty. And somehow, that hurt more than if he'd just been poor all along. For 2 weeks, I lived alone in that tiny room, wrestling with truths that felt too big for the space. Kadir had left money, more than I'd ever seen at once, but I couldn't bring myself to touch it. Instead, I kept selling water at the motor park, letting the familiar routine anchor me while my world spun out of control. The other vendors noticed my husband's absence but didn't ask questions. In places like Agege, people understood that some silences were meant to be respected. It was Mama Kimi, the woman who sold roasted plantain next to my water stand, who finally broke through my isolation. "That man of yours," she said one afternoon as we watched passengers board a bus to Ibadan. "He's different from the others around here." "What do you mean?" "His hands." She gestured with her own work-worn fingers. "Too soft for someone who truly fixes cars. And the way he talks to people, like he's used to being listened to." I looked at her sharply. You notice that? She laughed, a rich sound that reminded me of my mother. Child, I've been watching people for 60 years. You learn to see what they're trying to hide. That evening, I finally opened the newspaper clipping again, studying Kadir's face in the photograph. There was something in his expression, a trapped look I recognized now that I knew what to see. The knock on my door came late, after the last call to prayer had echoed across the neighborhood. I expected to see Kadir, but instead found a woman I'd never seen before. She was elegant in a way that spoke of money. Her wrapper was pure silk, her jewelry real gold, but her eyes held the same trapped expression I'd seen in Kadir's photograph. You must be Amina, she said in perfect English, tinged with a Yoruba accent. I am Mrs. Aduni Adebayo, Kadir's mother. My legs nearly gave out. She took in our tiny room without judgment, settling onto the single plastic chair as if it were a throne at the Echo Hotel. May I sit? I nodded, too shocked to speak. My son has told me about you, she continued, though I had to hire a private investigator to find where he was living. He told you about me? Recently, yes, after he came home. Home? 3 days ago. He showed up at our house in Ikoyi looking like he'd been carrying the world on his shoulders. She studied my face carefully. He says he's in love with you. The words hit me like a slap. Then why isn't he here telling me that himself? Because he's terrified you'll never forgive him. Mrs. Adebayo opened her purse, crocodile leather that probably cost more than I made in a year, and pulled out a photograph. This was taken at Kadir's 21st birthday party, she said, handing it to me. Look at his face. In the photo, Kadir stood surrounded by well-wishers in an opulent ballroom. Everyone was smiling except him. He looked miserable, trapped, like an animal in a cage. We pushed him too hard, she continued. His father and I, we had his whole life planned. Which university, which career, which wife. Everything except what would make him happy. So he ran away. So he escaped, she corrected, using the same word Kadir had used. And for the first time in years, when he talks about his life, he smiles. I looked up from the photograph. What do you want from me? I want to understand what my son sees in you. The question could have been an insult, but something in her tone suggested genuine curiosity rather than condescension. I don't know, I said honestly. I'm just a girl from Mushin who sells water to survive. My husband started with a single bus, she said quietly. I was a teacher in a government school when we met. Money doesn't make you better than anyone, child. It just gives you different problems. She stood to leave, then paused at the door. He wants you to come home with him, to Ikoyi, to meet his father and see how he really lives. And if I don't? Then he says he'll keep living like this, in places like this, because this is where you are. After she left, I sat alone with my thoughts until dawn broke over Lagos. The photograph lay on our tiny table next to the newspaper clipping, and I found myself comparing the two images of Kadir, the miserable rich boy, and the confident heir. Neither looked like the gentle man who'd slept on the floor to give me space. The next morning brought unexpected news that would change everything. I was preparing for another day at the motor park when Chinelo arrived, her face grim with worry. Amina, it's Aunt Fatima, she said breathlessly. She's in the hospital. The world tilted. What happened? She collapsed yesterday morning. They took her to Lagos General, but Chinelo's voice broke. She needs surgery, her appendix. They say if they don't operate today. I was already grabbing my headscarf, my small savings from the past weeks. How much? 500,000 naira. The number hit me like a physical blow. 500,000. I had maybe 30,000 saved, and that had taken months to accumulate. At Lagos General Hospital, I found Aunt Fatima lying on a gurney in the hallway, her face gray with pain. The smell of disinfectant and desperation hung in the air like a fog. Amina, she whispered when she saw me. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. Don't talk, I said, gripping her hand. Save your strength. But the doctor's words were brutal in their simplicity. No deposit, no surgery, hospital policy. I stood in that corridor, surrounded by other families, facing the same impossible choice, and felt rage rise in my throat like bile. Around me, people were dying, while clerks demanded payment slips. That's when I remembered the money Kadir had left in our room. I ran back to Agege like my life depended on it, my heart pounding against my ribs. The money was where he'd left it, neatly stacked bills in a plain envelope. I counted it quickly. 200,000 naira, still not enough. But I knew someone who had more. My hands shook as I dialed the number Kadir had written on a piece of paper weeks ago. "In case of emergency," he'd said. "Amina?" His voice came through immediately, filled with hope and worry. "I need your help," I said without preamble. "Aunt Fatima is dying." 20 minutes later, he arrived at the hospital in a car that turned heads, a black Mercedes that looked like it belonged to a government minister, but I barely noticed. All I could think about was the woman who'd raised me lying on that gurney. "Where is she?" he asked. I led him through the chaos of Lagos General, past crying children and exhausted families camping in hallways. When we reached Aunt Fatima, Kadir took one look at her condition and turned to find the doctor. "Dr. Okafor," he said, reading the man's name tag. "I'm Kadir Adebayo. I'll be handling Mrs. Fatima's medical expenses." Something shifted in the doctor's demeanor when he heard the name Adebayo. "Of course, sir. We'll prepare the operating theater immediately." As they wheeled Aunt Fatima away, she gripped my hand. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. "Your mother would be proud." The surgery took 4 hours. Kadir and I sat in uncomfortable plastic chairs, not talking, just waiting. He'd change back into simple clothes, but I could see now what Mama Kemi had noticed, the way he carried himself, the quiet authority that money brings. "Why didn't you just pay from the beginning?" I asked finally. "Because you needed to ask," he said simply. "You needed to choose me." When Dr. Okafor emerged from surgery, his smile told us everything we needed to know. "She's stable," he said. "Full recovery expected." As we walked out of the hospital into the Lagos night, I felt something settle in my chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. "Thank you," I said. "She's your family. That makes her mine too." We reached his car, and he turned to face me. "Come home with me," he said quietly. "Not to the room in Agege. Home." I looked at this man who'd lied to me about everything except how he felt, who'd paid for surgery without being asked, who'd given up a palace to live in a single room because that's where I was. "What happens to us now?" I asked. "Whatever you want to happen." In the distance, Lagos sparkled like scattered diamonds, a city of dreams and nightmares, of poverty and incredible wealth existing side by side. And somewhere in that maze of possibility, maybe there was room for a girl from Mushin and a prince who'd chosen exile over comfort. Maybe there was room for us. But first, I needed to see his world. "Show me," I said. "Show me who you really are." The smile that spread across his face was worth more than all the Adebayo money in the world. The drive to Ikoyi felt like traveling to another planet. As Kadir's Mercedes glided through Lagos traffic, I watched my city transform from the chaotic familiarity of mainland to the manicured lawns and high walls of Victoria Island, then finally to the pristine streets of Ikoyi. "You're quiet," Kadir said, as we passed a row of mansions that looked like hotels. "I'm thinking." I pressed my face to the window, watching security guards in crisp uniforms wave us through checkpoints. All this time, you could have been living here. I was living here for 25 years. It nearly killed me. The Adebayo compound took up an entire city block. Electric gates slid open silently, revealing manicured gardens that seemed to glow under floodlights. The main house rose before us like something from a movie. 3 stories of gleaming white marble and glass, with balconies that overlooked a swimming pool bigger than most people's entire homes. "This is where you grew up?" I whispered. "This is my prison," he said quietly, "though I suppose it's a beautiful one." A uniformed steward opened my car door. "Welcome home, young master," he said to Kadir, then turned to me with a slight bow. "Ma'am." The inside of the house was even more overwhelming. Marble floors reflected crystal chandeliers, and oil paintings in gold frames lined walls that stretched up to impossible heights. Everything gleamed with the kind of perfection that required an army of servants to maintain. "Kadir!" A deep voice boomed from the top of a curved staircase. Chief Adebayo descended like a king granting audience. He was a tall man with silver hair and the kind of presence that commanded rooms. His traditional agbada was perfectly tailored, and even his house slippers looked expensive. "Papa," Kadir said respectfully, "this is Amina, my wife." Chief Adebayo studied me with sharp eyes that missed nothing. my cheap dress, my nervous hands, the way I stood slightly behind Kadir, as if trying to hide. "So you were the one who stole my son," he said finally. The words could have been an accusation, but something in his tone suggested amusement rather than anger. "I didn't steal him, sir," I replied, finding my voice. "He chose to leave." "Ah," a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "She has spirit, this one." Mrs. Adebayo appeared then, sweeping into the room in a flowing gown that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe, but her eyes were kind as she embraced me. "Welcome to our home, my dear," she said warmly. "I hope you're hungry. Mama City has prepared a feast." Dinner was served in a dining room that could have seated 50 people. Crystal glasses caught the light from overhead chandeliers, and the table was set with china so delicate I was afraid to touch it. "Tell me about yourself, Amina," Chief Adebayo said, as uniformed servers brought course after course of food I'd never seen before. "There's not much to tell, sir. I'm from Mushin. My parents died when I was 14. I lived with my aunt until—" I glanced at Kadir. "Until I married your son." "And what did you study?" "I finished secondary school. I was supposed to start at Lagos State University, but—" I shrugged. Life had other plans. "What would you have studied?" "Medicine," I said without hesitation. "I wanted to be a doctor." Something shifted in Chief Adebayo's expression. "Why medicine?" "Because I've watched too many people die from things that could have been prevented. Poverty shouldn't be a death sentence." The table fell quiet except for the soft clink of silver against china. "An admirable goal," Chief Adebayo said finally, "and one that requires significant sacrifice." After dinner, Kadir showed me to what would be my room, a space larger than 3 of our rooms in Agege combined, with its own bathroom and a balcony overlooking the pool. "This is temporary," he said quickly, seeing my overwhelmed expression, "until we figure out what we want to do." "What do you mean?" "I mean, we can live here, or we can live somewhere else, or we can travel. Whatever makes you happy." I sank into a chair that was softer than any bed I'd ever slept in. "Kadir, I need to understand something. Why did you really marry me?" He sat on the edge of the massive bed, his hands clasped between his knees. "Because when I saw you at that mosque, you looked like I felt trapped, scared, like someone else was deciding your fate." He paused. "I thought maybe we could save each other." "And did we?" "You saved me," he said simply. "Every day in that little room, every evening when you came home from selling water, every time you counted our money and made it stretch for meals. You showed me what real life felt like. Real life is struggle. Real life is purpose. Real life is working for something that matters, not just having everything handed to you." The next morning, I woke in a bed so soft I felt like I was floating. Sunlight streamed through curtains that probably cost more than most people made in a month, and for a moment, I forgot where I was. A gentle knock on the door revealed a young woman in a maid's uniform. "Good morning, ma'am. I'm Blessing. Madam asked me to help you dress for breakfast." "Help me dress?" I looked down at my simple dress. "What's wrong with what I'm wearing?" Blessing's smile was kind but knowing. "Nothing, ma'am, but Madam thought you might like options." She opened a wardrobe I hadn't noticed the night before. Inside hung dozens of dresses, all in my size, all more beautiful than anything I'd ever owned. "Where did these come from?" "Madam went shopping yesterday while you were at the hospital," Blessing explained. "She said every woman deserves a wardrobe that makes her feel like a queen." I touched the fabric of a blue dress, silk so soft it felt like water between my fingers. "I can't accept all this," I said. "Why not?" It was a simple question, but I couldn't find a simple answer. Pride, fear, the sense that accepting these gifts would somehow change who I was? At breakfast, Mrs. Adebayo was waiting with news that would change everything. "I spoke to my friend Professor Oyelowo at the University of Lagos," she said as I sat down to fresh fruit and pastries. "He's the dean of the College of Medicine." My heart stopped. "Ma'am?" "He's agreed to review your secondary school results. If they're as good as you say, there may be a place for you in the new semester. But the fees—" "Will be taken care of," Chief Adebayo said firmly. "Education is an investment, not a gift." I looked around the table, at Kadir's encouraging smile, at his parents' expectant faces, and felt something crack open in my chest. "Why?" I whispered. "Why would you do this for me?" "Because," Mrs. Adebayo said gently, Any woman strong enough to capture our son's heart, wise enough to make him choose love over comfort, deserves every chance to become who she's meant to be. That afternoon, while Kadir was in meetings with his father's business associates, Mrs. Adebayo took me shopping in Victoria Island. Not the kind of shopping I was used to, haggling at Computer Village or Alaba Market, but the sort where assistants brought you tea while you tried on clothes that cost more than most people's salaries. "This is too much," I protested as she selected outfit after outfit. "I don't need all this." "Need and deserve are different things," she replied. "Besides, you're an Adebayo now. Like it or not, people will judge our entire family based on how you present yourself." The weight of that responsibility settled on my shoulders like a heavy blanket. "I don't know how to be rich," I admitted. "Nobody does initially. Wealth is a skill like any other. It has to be learned." She paused in her selection of handbags. "But more importantly, you have to decide what kind of rich person you want to be." "What do you mean?" "Some wealthy people use their money as a wall, to separate themselves from the world's problems. Others use it as a tool, to build, to help, to change things." She looked at me directly. "Which kind do you think you are?" That evening, as I sat in my palatial room, wearing a dress that cost more than I used to make in 3 months, I thought about her question. Through my window, I could see Lagos stretching out below, millions of lights representing millions of people struggling to survive another day. Somewhere in that maze was the motor park where I used to sell water, the hospital where Aunt Fatima was recovering, the tiny room in Agege where Kadir and I had been happy in our simple way. All of it felt very far away now. But when Kadir knocked on my door that night, bringing tea and asking about my day, I realized that distance was a choice. "I want to go back," I said suddenly. "Back where?" "To the hospital, to check on Aunt Fatima, and then to Agege. I want to see our old room." He studied my face carefully. "Why?" "Because I need to remember who I am before I decide who I want to become." His smile was proud and relieved. "I'll drive you in the morning." "Good," I said. "And Kadir, from now on, no more lies, about anything." "No more lies," he agreed. But even as he said it, I wondered if either of us really understood what we were promising. In a world where money changed everything it touched, could anyone really stay the same? We were about to find out. The next morning, I woke before dawn with a strange feeling in my stomach. Something wasn't right, but I couldn't place what it was until Blessing knocked on my door, her usually bright face clouded with worry. "Ma'am, there's been a problem," she said quietly. "It's about your aunt." My blood turned to ice. "What kind of problem?" "The hospital called. She took a turn for the worse during the night. They're asking for family to come immediately." I was dressed in Kadir's Mercedes within minutes, my heart hammering against my ribs. The drive to Lagos General felt endless, every red light an eternity, every slow truck a personal insult. "She'll be fine," Kadir kept saying, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. At the hospital, Dr. Okafor met us with news that shattered my world. "I'm sorry," he said, his professional composure cracking slightly. "We did everything we could. She developed complications from the surgery. Her heart—" The rest of his words faded into white noise. Aunt Fatima was gone. I don't remember much about the next few hours. There were forms to sign, arrangements to make, decisions about burial that seemed impossible to comprehend. Kadir handled most of it, his quiet efficiency a blessing I couldn't appreciate through my grief. But one conversation cut through my numbness like a blade. "The thing is," Dr. Okafor said as we prepared to leave, "she was asking for you all night, kept saying she had something important to tell you." "What?" "The nurse said she kept mentioning a box, hidden under her mattress. She seemed very agitated about it. Back at Aunt Fatima's room in Mushin, a place I hadn't visited since my wedding day, I found the box exactly where Dr. Okafor had described. It was small, wooden, tied with a faded ribbon that had once been pink. Inside were things that changed everything I thought I knew about my life. Letters, dozens of them, all addressed to me, all bearing the letterhead of Lagos State University. Acceptance letters, scholarship notifications, housing assignments, everything I'd been told I'd never received. And at the bottom, a letter in Aunt Fatima's careful handwriting. "My dear Amina," it began, "if you are reading this, then I am gone, and you have found what I should have given you months ago. I am a foolish old woman who thought she knew what was best for you. The university accepted you. They offered you a full scholarship for medicine. Everything you dreamed of was waiting for you. But I was scared of losing the only family I had left. Scared of being alone. So I hid the letters and convinced you that marriage was your only option. I am sorry, my child. I am so very sorry. The scholarship money, I used it to pay other debts. But maybe, if God is merciful, you can find another way to your dreams. Your loving aunt, Fatima. I read the letter 3 times before the words truly sank in, then I screamed. I screamed until my throat was raw, until Kadir pulled me into his arms, until the neighbors came running to see what was wrong. I screamed for the dreams that had been stolen from me, for the year I'd lost, for the woman who'd loved me enough to take care of me, but not enough to let me go. She lied to me, I sobbed against Kadir's chest. She made me think I wasn't good enough, that marriage was my only choice. But I could have been in medical school right now. I could have been... Shh, he whispered, rocking me gently. It's okay, we'll figure this out. How? How do we figure this out? She's dead, the scholarship is gone, and I'm married to someone I barely know. The words hung in the air between us, like a curse. I felt Kadir stiffen, and when I looked up at his face, I saw pain there that matched my own. Is that really how you feel? He asked quietly. That you barely know me? I wanted to take the words back, but the grief and anger were too fresh, too raw. I don't know how I feel about anything anymore, I said honestly. That night, back in my luxurious room at the Adebayo compound, I stared at the ceiling and tried to make sense of my life. In the space of 24 hours, I'd lost the only mother figure I'd ever really known and discovered that my entire marriage was built on a lie. Not just Kadir's lie about his identity, but Aunt Fatima's lie about my future. What would have happened if she'd given me those letters? Would I be in medical school now, living in a dormitory, studying for exams instead of learning how to navigate wealth I'd never asked for? The knock on my door came late, after the compound had settled into its evening quiet. Come in, I said, expecting to see Blessing with tea or Mrs. Adebayo with words of comfort. Instead, it was Chief Adebayo, still dressed in his business suit despite the late hour. May I sit? He asked. I gestured to the chair by the window, wondering what the patriarch of the family could possibly want with me at such an hour. Kadir told us about the letters, he said without preamble, about what your aunt did. I nodded, not trusting my voice. It must be very painful to discover that your choices were taken from you. Yes, sir. I understand that feeling, he said quietly. More than you might think. I looked at him in surprise. Sir? When I was your age, I wanted to be a teacher, like my father before me. I loved books, loved learning, loved the idea of shaping young minds. He smiled sadly. But my family had other plans. They needed someone to take over the family transport business. 1 bus, 2 drivers, dreams of something bigger. But you became successful. I became wealthy, he corrected. Success and wealth are not always the same thing. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both lost in thoughts of paths not taken. The question now, he continued, is what you want to do with this knowledge. I don't understand. The scholarship is gone, yes, but you are now part of a family that can afford to send you to any university in the world. You could study medicine at Lagos, at Harvard, at Oxford, wherever you choose. The possibility hung in the air like a golden thread, beautiful and terrifying. But I sensed there was more. But you would have to decide if that's what you truly want, or if you're just chasing a dream that was stolen from you. He leaned forward slightly. Sometimes, Amina, the life we end up with is better than the one we planned. After he left, I sat by the window looking out at Lagos, this city of impossible contrasts where millionaires and street hawkers shared the same traffic jams, where dreams were born and died every day. I thought about the girl I'd been 6 months ago, selling water at the motor park, counting naira like they were diamonds, dreaming of a future that seemed as distant as the moon. Now, I was married to a millionaire, living in a mansion, with the resources to pursue any dream I wanted. So why did I feel so lost? The answer came to me as I watched the city lights twinkle in the distance. It wasn't about the money or the opportunities or even the lies that had shaped my path. It was about choice. Aunt Fatima had taken away my choice. Kadir, despite his good intentions, had married me when I had no real choice. Even now, surrounded by luxury and possibility, I felt like I was being carried along by currents I couldn't control. But maybe it was time to start making my own choices. The next morning, I found Kadir in his father's study, poring over business documents with the same intensity I'd once seen him fake when pretending to fix engines. "We need to talk," I said. He looked up, and I saw wariness in his eyes, as if he was bracing for another blow. "About what?" "About us, about what we both want from this marriage." He set down his pen and gave me his full attention. "What do you want to know?" "I want to know if you married me because you loved me, or because you were running away from your real life." The question hung between us like a challenge. When he finally answered, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Both," he said honestly. "I was running, and you were the first real thing I'd found worth running to." It wasn't the romantic declaration I might have hoped for, but it was honest. And after all the lies, honesty felt like the most precious gift he could give me. "I want to go back to school," I said suddenly, "to study medicine, but not because of the scholarship I lost or because your family can afford it, because it's what I choose to do with my life." "Okay. And I want to work while I study, in clinics, in hospitals, anywhere they'll let me help people who can't afford private health care." "Okay. And I want us to move out of your parents' house, not back to Agig, but somewhere that's ours, where we can figure out who we are together without all this." I gestured at the opulent room around us. "Okay." I studied his face, looking for any sign of reluctance or resentment. Instead, I saw something that looked like relief. "Just like that?" I asked. "Okay?" "Amina," he said, standing and moving closer to me. "I've been rich my entire life. I've had everything money can buy except the one thing that actually matters." "Which is?" "A partner who chooses me every day. Not for my family name or my bank account or the security I can provide. Just me." For the first time since finding those letters, since losing Aunt Fatima, since my world turned upside down, I felt something like peace settle in my chest. "I choose you," I said quietly. "But I also choose myself, my dreams, my work, my way of living in the world. I wouldn't want it any other way." As he kissed me there in his father's study, surrounded by the trappings of wealth and power that had once seemed so important, I realized something profound. Love wasn't about the size of your house or the number in your bank account. It wasn't about perfect circumstances or fairy tale beginnings. It was about choosing each other again and again, even when the choice was hard, especially when the choice was hard. And for the first time since this whole journey began, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. But life, as I was about to learn, rarely lets you stay comfortable for long. The real test was still coming. 3 weeks later, just as Kadir and I were looking at apartments in Yaba and I was preparing for my entrance interviews at the University of Lagos, everything fell apart. It started with a phone call that came too early in the morning, the kind that always brings bad news. I was having breakfast with Mrs. Adebayo when Kadir's phone rang. His face went white as he listened, and I knew before he hung up that our fragile peace was about to shatter. "What is it?" his mother asked. "That was Uncle Tunda," Kadir said, his voice tight. "The family council has called an emergency meeting. They're questioning the validity of our marriage." "What does that mean?" I asked, though I had a sinking feeling I already knew. "It means," Mrs. Adebayo said grimly, "that someone has been talking to lawyers." The meeting was held in the boardroom of Adebayo Industries, a gleaming tower in Victoria Island that housed the family's vast business empire. I'd never seen Kadir look so tense as we rode the elevator to the 42nd floor. "Whatever happens," he said, gripping my hand, "remember that I chose you. I will always choose you." The boardroom was intimidating by design, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lagos Harbor, a massive table that could seat 20 people, and portraits of Adebayo patriarchs staring down from the walls like judges. Around the table sat faces I didn't recognize, uncles, aunts, cousins, and family lawyers, all wearing expressions that ranged from disapproving to openly hostile. At the head sat Chief Adebayo, looking older and more tired than I'd ever seen him. "Kadir," said a stern-faced woman I later learned was his Aunt Modupe, "we need to discuss this situation you've created." "Situation?" Kadir's voice was dangerously quiet. You mean my marriage to my wife? A marriage, interjected a thin man in an expensive suit, that was conducted without family consent, without proper bride price negotiations, and without consideration of the family's business interests. With respect, Uncle Dealey, I don't need family consent to marry who I choose. Actually, you do. This from the family lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman who spread documents across the table like weapons. According to the terms of your grandfather's will, any marriage contracted by the heir apparent must be approved by the family council or risk forfeiture of inheritance rights. The room went silent except for the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sounds of Lagos traffic far below. That's an outdated clause from a different era, Mrs. Adebayo said firmly. It was never meant to— The law doesn't care about intent, Aduni, Aunt Modepe interrupted. It cares about what's written, and what's written is clear. I felt like I was watching this happen to someone else. These people were discussing my marriage, my life, as if I wasn't even in the room. Furthermore, the lawyer continued, there are questions about the circumstances of the marriage itself. The bride's family received substantial payment to settle debts. In legal terms, this could be construed as a transaction rather than a legitimate union. That's enough, Kadir stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the marble floor. You're talking about my wife as if she's a business deal. Aren't all marriages business deals in the end? Uncle Deal's smile was cold. The question is whether this particular deal serves the family's interests. And we believe it does not. This from a cousin I'd met briefly at dinner, Biodun, who managed the family's oil investments. The girl has no education beyond secondary school, no family connections, no dowry. What does she bring to this family besides scandal? The words hit me like slaps, each one carefully chosen to wound. I wanted to defend myself, to tell them about my dreams of medical school, about the scholarship I'd lost, about my determination to help people who couldn't afford private health care. But before I could speak, Kadir exploded. What she brings is integrity, he said, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. What she brings is the ability to see me as a person, not an asset to be managed. What she brings is more humanity than this entire room has shown in 20 years of family meetings. Kadir, his father began. No, Papa, I'm done. He turned to face the assembled relatives. You want to know what Amina brings to this family? She brings honesty. She works for what she has. She doesn't take anything for granted. She makes me want to be better than the spoiled heir you all raised. Pretty words, Aunt Modepe said dismissively, but they don't pay dividends. That's when I found my voice. You're right, I said quietly, and the room turned to look at me as if surprised I could speak. I don't bring wealth or connections or political advantages. I stood up, matching their stares with my own. What I bring is the understanding that money without purpose is just paper. What I bring is the knowledge that respect is earned, not inherited. And what I bring is the absolute certainty that I will never, ever apologize for loving your son exactly as he is. The silence that followed was deafening. You can take away his inheritance, I continued, my voice growing stronger. You can write him out of your wills and your business plans, but you cannot take away the choice he made to marry me. And you cannot make him into the man you want him to be instead of the man he chooses to be. Uncle Del laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the glass windows. Noble sentiments, but let's see how noble you feel when the money runs out. When you're back to selling water in the sun while your husband struggles to find work with no family support. Then we'll struggle together, I said simply, and we'll be happier than you are with all your wealth and your fear. The lawyer cleared her throat. Be that as it may, the legal reality remains. Mr. Kadir, you have 30 days to have this marriage annulled, or you forfeit all claims to the Adebayo fortune. And if he chooses his wife over the money, Mrs. Adebayo asked. Then he is, of course, free to make that choice, Chief Adebayo said quietly, but he makes it knowing the consequences. As we left the building, I felt strangely calm, despite the chaos we'd just endured. In the elevator, Kadir was quiet, staring at his reflection in the polished steel doors. Regrets? I asked. About marrying you? Never. He took my hand. About my family's behavior? Every single day. What happens now? Now we decide what kind of life we want to build together. That evening, we sat on the balcony of our temporary room at the family compound, looking out at the lights of Lagos. Somewhere in that sprawling city were millions of people facing their own impossible choices, their own moments of truth. "I have an idea," I said suddenly. "What kind of idea?" "The kind that might solve all our problems, or make them much, much worse." Kadir turned to look at me, and in the dim light, I saw the same expression he'd worn that first day at the mosque, as if he was seeing me clearly for the first time. "Tell me," he said. And as I outlined my plan, I watched his expression change from uncertainty to amazement to something that looked like fierce pride. "It's risky," he said when I finished. "Everything worthwhile is risky. It might not work. Then we'll try something else. The family will be furious. The family is already furious." He was quiet for a long moment, thinking it through. Then he smiled, the same smile that had made me trust him in that tiny room in Agege all those months ago. "When do we start?" he asked. And for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt something like hope bloom in my chest. We were going to fight back. But first, we were going to shock everyone by doing something no one expected. Something that would either save us or destroy us completely. My plan was simple in concept, revolutionary in execution. "We're going to call their bluff," I told Kadir as we sat in his father's study the next morning, surrounded by business documents and family photos that suddenly felt like relics of a different life. "What do you mean?" "Your family thinks I married you for money. They think I'm some gold digger who'll disappear the moment things get difficult." I pulled out the notebook where I'd spent the night scribbling calculations and ideas. "So, we're going to prove them wrong in the most public way possible." I explained my plan step by step, watching his expression shift from confusion to understanding to something that looked like awe. "We announced that we are renouncing the inheritance voluntarily," I continued. "Not because they're forcing us to, but because we choose to. And then we use the next 30 days to build something of our own." "Build what?" "A medical clinic, in Mushin, where I grew up, for people who can't afford private health care." I leaned forward, my excitement building as I spoke. "We use your business connections, your education, my knowledge of what the community actually needs. We create something real, something that helps people, something that proves wealth isn't just about how much you inherit. It's about what you do with what you have." Kadir was quiet for a long moment, staring at the family portrait on his father's desk. "It would mean giving up everything," he said finally. "The houses, the cars, the security, everything." "No," I said firmly. "It would mean giving up things. There's a difference. The family will never forgive us. Some of them will, the ones worth keeping." I thought about Mrs. Adebayo, about Chief Adebayo's own story of roads not taken. And the ones who won't, maybe we're better off without them. It could fail completely. We could end up with nothing. We could end up with everything that matters. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw the exact moment he made his choice. "When do we start?" 3 days later, we called a press conference. The timing was perfect. Lagos business reporters were always hungry for Adebayo family news, and the story of the heir who chose love over money was irresistible clickbait. We held it at the Echo Hotel, in the same ballroom where Kadir had once looked miserable at family celebrations. "Ladies and gentlemen," Kadir began, standing behind a podium with me beside him. 3 months ago, I married the woman I love. Today I want to tell you about the choice we've made together." The room was packed, reporters, society photographers, business associates, and scattered throughout the crowd, members of the Adebayo family looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. There has been speculation about the circumstances of our marriage, about my wife's motivations, about the family's approval. His voice was steady, confident. "Today, we want to set the record straight." I stepped forward to the microphone. My hands were shaking, but my voice came out clear and strong. "My name is Amina Adebayo. 3 months ago, I was selling water at Agege Motor Park to survive. Today, I stand before you as proof that in Nigeria, love can bridge any gap, if we're brave enough to build the bridge ourselves." A murmur ran through the crowd. "We are here to announce that we are voluntarily renouncing any claim to the Adebayo family inheritance," I continued. "Not because we're being forced to, but because we choose to build our own legacy." The murmur became a buzz of excited conversation. Kadir took the microphone back. With the seed funding from my personal savings and the support of partners who believe in our vision, we are proud to announce the establishment of the Fatima Medical Foundation, a network of clinics providing free healthcare to underserved communities across Lagos. The room erupted. Camera flashes went off like lightning. Reporters shouted questions, and in the back, I saw Uncle Deal's face go white with shock. "The first clinic will open in Mushin within 60 days, I said, taking back the microphone. It will be staffed by volunteer doctors and nurses, funded by a combination of private donations and revenue from our medical supply social enterprise. We're not doing this to make a point," Kadir added. "We're doing this because healthcare is a human right, not a luxury, and because sometimes the best inheritance you can leave is not money, but a better world." After the press conference, as reporters filed out and photographers packed their equipment, I saw Chief and Mrs. Adebayo approaching. The rest of the family had left without speaking to us, but Kadir's parents had stayed. "That was either the most brilliant thing I've ever seen," Chief Adebayo said quietly, "or the most foolish." "Time will tell, Papa," Kadir replied. Mrs. Adebayo stepped forward and embraced me warmly. "Your aunt would be proud," she whispered in my ear. "You've honored her memory." "There's something else," Chief Adebayo said, reaching into his jacket pocket. "Something I want to give you." He handed Kadir a small wooden box, old, worn smooth by years of handling. "This was your grandfather's. He started the family business with nothing but determination and a dream of helping people move from one place to another." He looked at both of us. "I think he would approve of what you're doing." Inside the box was a simple brass key. To his first bus, Chief Adebayo explained, he kept it his whole life as a reminder that everything great starts small. 6 months later, I stood in the waiting room of the Fatima Medical Clinic, watching Dr. Aduni, my former classmate who had left her job at the fancy private hospital to work with us, treat a young mother whose baby had a fever. Through the window, I could see the bustling streets of Mushin, where I'd grown up. The same narrow alleys, the same crowded buses, the same smell of frying plantain and car exhaust. But now, there was something new. A bright blue building with a simple sign: free medical care for all. "Mrs. Amina?" A young voice interrupted my thoughts. I turned to see Blessing, not the maid from the Adebayo compound, but a different Blessing, a 12-year-old girl from the neighborhood, whose mother brought her in for regular checkups. "Yes, dear?" "My teacher says you used to sell water at the motor park. Is that true?" "Yes, it's true." "And now you're married to a rich man, but you work here instead of living in a big house." I knelt down to her level, thinking about how to explain something so complex to someone so young. "Do you know what makes someone rich, Blessing?" She shook her head. "It's not how much money you have in the bank. It's how much good you can do with whatever you have." I gestured around the clinic, at the mothers waiting with their children, at the elderly man getting his blood pressure checked, at Dr. Aduni patiently explaining medication to a worried father. This makes me richer than any mansion ever could. That evening, I walked home to the modest apartment in Yaba that Kadir and I had chosen together. It was small compared to his family's compound, but it was ours. The walls were covered with photos from the clinic, letters from grateful patients, and plans for expanding to other neighborhoods. Kadir was waiting for me with dinner, rice and stew that he'd learned to cook himself, served on simple plates at a wooden table we'd bought at Alaba Market. "How was your day?" he asked, the same question he'd asked every evening for the past year. "Good," I said, settling into my chair. "Dr. Aduni says we're ready to apply for that government partnership, and the medical students from University of Lagos want to start doing their rotations with us." "And how do you feel about that?" I thought about the question, really thought about it. A year ago, I'd been a scared 17-year-old girl being forced into marriage. Now, I was a woman running a medical foundation, starting my own studies part-time, married to a man who'd given up a fortune to build a life with me. "I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," I said honestly. Outside our window, Lagos hummed with its eternal energy. Millions of people chasing dreams, facing challenges, making choices that would define their futures. Somewhere in that maze, a girl might be selling water in the sun, wondering if her life would ever be different. I hoped she would learn what I had learned, that the richest inheritance isn't money or property or family names. It's the courage to choose love over comfort, purpose over security, and the hard work of building something meaningful, over the easy pleasure of consuming what others have built. Any regrets? Kadir asked, echoing my question from all those months ago. I reached across the table and took his hand, still calloused from his months as a mechanic, now stained with the honest work of building clinics and loading medical supplies. Only one, I said. What's that? That I didn't meet you sooner. His smile lit up our small apartment, better than any chandelier in any mansion ever could. And as we sat together in our modest home, planning our modest dreams, I realized something profound. We had become exactly what we'd always been meant to be. Not an heir and his convenient wife. Not a rich man and his poor bride. Just two people who'd chosen each other, chosen their values, and chosen to build something beautiful together. In the end, that was the richest inheritance of all.